Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Stokastic.com MLB strategy show. Dave Loughran and Matt Belman. 12-game action today. So, yeah, making things happen. A lot of games. Friday, I think 7:05 first pitch. Some good pitching. Some matter of fact, Matt may not love this, but if you just take a gander at the pitching on this slate and you go, who are the really expensive guys? Like, who's north of 10K on a 12-game slate? You know, a lot of good arms in this league. Oh, 10,300 Ranger Suarez. Boy, that fella's good, huh?
He is good. Wouldn't be the first time that DraftKings has overpriced a pitcher.
Like
No.
$9,600 NOLA, right?
That said about Suarez here, not only has he been phenomenal this season, I mean, a lot of people have said he's been the best pitcher in the majors so far, and he gets this pristine matchup. So yeah, pretty loaded pitching slate. I don't know if I've ever seen a slate in the past, I don't know, 2 years or whatever, where the opposing pitcher against the Dodgers is the highest ranked arm in our top pitcher tool.
That'll change. So I reached out to our guys
Okay.
on the data team and I told them, said, hey, fellas, something's a little wonky here. And so where we were pulling odds from, there's just something wrong with the odds pull. Because I said, like, guys, you know, Michael K 7,100, no arguments there. Guy's good. But it's a tough spot. If you actually look at the totals, and they're working on this now, so it should be fixed while we're doing the show. Just keep that in mind, guys. You know, if you're watching live or watching after the fact, it should be no problem us navigating through this. But like, we have the Dodgers with a 3.8 total right now and San Diego at 4.1. Dodgers are minus 185 on the money line with a 7.5 run total in this game. So that should at the very least be flipped.
Yeah, and that looks like just my bad for even saying something about that, because where the Dodgers are in the top stack tool, like basically right with San Diego, that does not add up. So I'm for sure with you here. I think that might be one of the only ones though that stands out to me.
I thought I saw a couple more. We can get into it, but
Sure.
that might be we had it happen before with a game. I think it was that Yankees Minnesota game or something like that. You remember?
Yep.
So yeah, it happens, but it's rerunning right now. They actually just hit us up. So they're rerunning ownership right now. Either way, we can dive into it. Happy as always to have you guys with us. Look, headed into the weekend, it's Friday. Let's celebrate. Let's have ourselves a night. Let's have ourselves a morning. But if you don't mind, before we do anything, just take one single second as you walk in the door here, atone for your sins, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below if you're listening or watching after the fact. And as always, you want to listen in podcast form, we got you. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you may want to listen, we're out there. So like right after this is done on YouTube, we'll upload it straight to all those podcast platforms. If you're someone that maybe watches later in the day, you can check it out. But dude, I'll tell you what, pitching, I actually think there's some really solid pitching on this slate, and not just pitching from the top. Like, I think there's some good mid-range options here. And I've said it once, I'll say it a million times. DraftKings, and I'm not talking about like Keaton Wynn yesterday, right? But like, DraftKings continues to, I think, underprice good pitchers at Coors Field. Especially, and like I said, Coors, you know, yesterday put up runs 49 degrees. There were also some weird ones there, like infield singles and seeing eye ground balls and stuff like that. But also, you know, Homer and this and that. I think it was Doyle, what had a 3-run shot. Point being, John Gray is getting 21% in Coors Field. And it doesn't shock me at all because he's 7,200. He's been a good pitcher this season. He's kind of like back to the John Gray that we remember, you know, in his better years with the Rockies, as a matter of fact. So there's a lot of that, but also some mid-range arms, I think, Matt, that are going to really stand out today.
I'm totally with you here. It's not only a opposing pitcher in Colorado problem, it's also a John Gray problem.
Yeah.
They continuously price him too cheap. And today is like basically the same story, different day. And to the first thing we talked about where I said King looks like the only real outlier here, that might be true. But to your point, like if one guy is off, it changes everything. So we'll just have to wait for the tools to update. But to your point, I think it'll be pretty easy to talk about anyways.
It will be. I mean, look, not that I want to just start in the mid-range, but to give you guys an idea, and I know some of you, like our boy Sean's always coming in here with the, with one in the chamber ready to unload on something that he's unearthed from these slates. King 7,100. In any matchup, I think you could argue that's underpriced. John Gray's 7,200. Paul Blackburn has not been bad, and Seattle strikes out in an alarming clip, particularly against righties. He's 7,500. Charlie Morton is 7,900. He's getting some ownership on a slate like this. So just looking at that mid-range, there's no shortage of options there if you're looking to pay up for bats today at all.
Not even a little bit. Brian Wu, who hasn't started this year, he's been fantastic in the minors so far. We know that he's a good arm, touted prospect, so he's been okay at the major league level. But just to your point, there's a bunch of good options in this, I don't know, 7 to 8,500 range.
Yeah, you get to 8K Brian Wu against Oakland. You're right. Another good spot. He's getting ownership, sure, but I think it's reasonable. Crochet's getting ownership. I don't know how much I love that spot against Cleveland, but there's strikeout upside there. So yeah, I mean, ultimately across the board, there's some real options. Tanner Houck is getting sub 10% today. So that kind of against the Washington Nationals. And look, we already know he's had some superb starts this season with great strikeout stuff. That just goes to show you how deep this is. On a lot of other slates, $9,100 Tanner Houck could be getting like 25% ownership, and he's in the single digits right now.
I feel the exact same about Suarez. Like,
yeah,
we've joked about him back and forth, but again, as I mentioned, he's been amazing this season. He's in probably the best matchup on the slate. I know the price tag, gives a little sticker shock, but on a lot of slates, he would be uber popular, and he's not getting any love tonight. So there's a lot of that.
Man, the price points are wild though. Like you look at FanDuel, and Glasnow's 11.3. Suarez is 11.1. 11-1 on FanDuel. Great, like you said, a good matchup in a really good park, but that's crazy. Houck's 10.8. Kikuchi is in the 5 figures now at 10K. There's another guy though. Like, all right, so you say Kikuchi. This has been someone that I've been very willing to roster at low ownership spots this season. Even, we talked about him against the Yankees, knowing that there's some K upside there, and Kikuchi and these Toronto pitchers at home just have some type of black magic at times. He's run this a couple tough matchups and come out okay. He's been good. The strikeout stuff is there. He's 9,600. What's his ownership on DraftKings? 2% against Minnesota. 25% K rate team. Now, of course, against lefties, it's a little different, but, and again, I'm not saying you got to run out there and play Kikuchi. My point is this is really deep today. Glasnow, Suarez, Joe Ryan, Kikuchi, Tanner Houck, all of those guys north of 9K, all of them have slate breaking upside.
Yeah, I hear you. Your point isn't that you just play Kikuchi. It's that the pitchers who aren't getting love today, or most of them at least, are very good pitchers. And Kikuchi fits that bill. I'm totally with you here. I guess my biggest problem with Kikuchi himself, and I do think that he's certainly viable, in tournaments as a contrarian option, is his price is so close to Suarez and Glasnow, where I just have a hard time getting to him over those guys. He's a little bit cheaper, but I do think that in the upper range, it's Glasnow as the clear number one, and then Suarez.
Yeah. I get it. 2% Kikuchi though. Pretty crazy. Minnesota has put a beating on lefties. There's no doubt about that. 126 WRC plus this season. Like they've been good. They have a 4.9 run implied total, but Kikuchi has also been good, right? Like this guy's been very, very good. 2 starts against the Yankees, 11 1/3 combined innings, 1 earned run, 16 Ks. It's there. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to play him. I think I'm with you that I'd probably get away from that today, but we've seen a lot of this lately where low-owned pitchers in maybe not the best spots, but good, like Cole Reagans has been a perfect example against Toronto just last week. nobody really wanted to get to Cole Reagans in that spot. I think he was what, like 7-8%, and he ended up having a strong game. So we'll see. But let's dig in from the top. So Glass now and Ranger, you have them 1 and 2 right now.
I do.
What about a guy like Joe Ryan against Toronto? He feels like an odd man out here, as good as he is, and he is good in Toronto against the Blue Jays. I can't imagine you're going to have an easy time, clicking on Joe Ryan in a spot. Like, honestly, I'd rather pay down the Kikuchi in the same game.
I don't know about that. I think that's close. I do think that Joe Ryan is the better pitcher between the two. I think that Kikuchi's in the better matchup as far as strikeout upside goes. I think that Minnesota and Toronto both their offenses are similarly talented right now. So yeah, I'll give the edge of the matchup to Kikuchi, but I do think Ryan is just the overall better pitcher. But man, like, I don't know how you get to him over Suarez or Glass now. Like, Suarez has been better this year and is in a much better spot. And Glass now is just the best DFS pitcher on the slate, and it's not really close with his strikeout upside. So he's not in a great matchup either, but he's a much better DFS pitcher than Joe Ryan. And that's not taking anything away from Ryan himself. He's very good. Matter of fact, on almost every slate he's been on this year, he's been the most popular pitcher on the slate. A lot of that has to do with the fact that he's faced Detroit and the White Sox a bunch. So I think he's intriguing in tournaments, but on paper, I really don't see how you play him over Suarez and Glass now. He does look a lot like Kikuchi to me. I slightly prefer Ryan, but not something I'd quibble over.
Yeah, I get it. I like Kikuchi a little bit more, but quite frankly, you're right. Joe Ryan's matchups this season, my God. I mean, yeah, he had Boston last time out. He was fine. White Sox, Tigers, Guardians, Royals. That's his schedule this season. Like, he's had some very good matchups. There's no doubt about that. But I feel like it's kind of a pick your poison in a lot of these spots. Like, you look at the top 2 pitcher probability on DraftKings, right? Actually, let me refresh this because I think we might have some new stuff going on here. Let's see. Yep. There we go. Okay, we fixed these totals. So as expected, Dodgers total came up. Padres went down. Glass now has the highest top 2 pitcher probability. Ranger Suarez has the second highest, and Tanner Houck at 14% has the third highest. Like I said, it was odd that he had 9% ownership. Tanner Houck's at 17% right now. That makes a lot more sense, right? So you've got Glass now and Houck at 17%, Ranger Suarez around 14%, Logan Webb at 16%. Okay, I'll tell you right now, this is one that doesn't really appeal to me all that much. I would rather, and do as you please, but I would rather just go up or go down. I'd rather go up or I would rather go down. Logan Webb is a very good pitcher. There's no doubt about that. But like, at that price point, why am I paying for a 18% strikeout rate? Why am I paying for a guy who has a 22% career K rate, which, this season would be below average, 18% this year? The strikeouts just haven't been there for Webb, and he's faced some difficult spots. There's no doubt about that. Coming off a spot against the Phillies, Boston, Mets, Arizona, Tampa, San Diego, Dodgers, San Diego. I get all of that, but I'd rather just pay up into the 9K range or pay down into the 7K range at that ownership.
I agree with that. I mean, he hasn't been anything special this year. Certainly like the ballpark here at home against Cincinnati. The matchup's okay. I don't dislike Webb here. I just don't particularly like him. So I'll tend to agree with you. I'd rather get to Houck, certainly Suarez or Glass now. And I do think that I'd rather spend down just because, he's not expensive, but with how he pitches and his lack of strikeout upside, as you mentioned, you need him to go real deep in this game. So yeah, I don't hate him because I think he's probably a safer option, but I'm not going out of my way to roster him either.
And Sean said Reds will definitely K, and it's a good park. No doubt about it. For sure, it's a good spot. Reds will strike out. They do have some power, but I'll tell you this much. And yeah, Red's second highest K rate in the league versus righties this season. I would rather go to Webb than Garrett Crochet. Tell you that much. The 20+% ownership that he's pulling right now is a little bit surprising to me against Cleveland. Maybe I'm just reading this wrong. Like I would grab Webb over Crochet in this spot at a similar price point in that 8K range.
It's actually really surprising to me the ownership Crochet is getting.
Me too.
He has not been popular at all on any recent slate. I know he's been good, but this matchup's not good. I mean, Cleveland doesn't strike out a lot. Their offense has been pretty good this season. I would really like Crochet here at low ownership, but the ownership's already there. I think that I would maybe prefer Webb slightly more at slightly lower ownership. I don't think those guys look too dissimilar here, though. And the top two pitcher tool says that their ownership isn't that far off. I kind of feel you like what you said about Webb is the same as Crochet. Like, I'd rather just get up to one of the top options or spend down a little bit more.
Any interest in Lance Lynn in this price range?
I don't think so. He's too expensive. I don't love the matchup. He's just been okay this year. He's not getting destroyed as often as he was last year. He's also not striking as many guys out. So, nah, he's too expensive. Like, I'd much rather play Logan Webb than Lance Lynn.
Let me back up for a second. I want to kind of eliminate the guys that we're not targeting. And that doesn't just mean low-owned guys. Because like I said, I have some interest in Kikuchi. He's at 4% now. Okay. So I'm not surprised that he's closer to Joe Ryan than he was before our last update. But like Austin Gomber, Patrick Corbin, Quintana, Trevor Rogers against Philly, Cole Irvin, Lance Lynn's not a guy I'm getting to. I don't love Brandon Pfaadt. Griffin Canning's whatever, but he's super cheap. Are there any other guys I'm missing that you're not interested in? Or did any of the guys that I mentioned that I'm not interested in appeal to you?
No, I think this is a great way to go about it, though, with so many pitchers in play. I'm right there with you. The only guy you didn't mention that I think I would put on that list is Carlos Carrasco. Now, maybe you say the matchup is so good that you could play him. I still wouldn't play him. So he belongs on that list with me. But everyone else, I think we're spot on. Maybe Cole Irvin. I don't know.
Yeah, I mentioned Irvin. The only reason I didn't mention Carrasco is because, I wanted to get your thoughts on him just because it is the White Sox. He is very cheap. My guess is that I end up getting like 5% Carrasco or something like that.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy. Just because what you said, the matchup's really good and he's so cheap. So if we're ranking these guys, like I would play Carrasco over Gomber and Corbin and Quintana. I think I'd play Canning before him because he's even cheaper.
Yeah,
but
very cheap.
You're like splitting hairs there, probably.
What about Paul Blackburn?
I see nothing wrong with him here. I think
He's been pretty good.
And Seattle, I mean, this team just can't get out of its own way. It's the same story with them. We know that when they put the ball in play, they have upside, but they so very, very rarely put the ball in play. I don't think it's, Blackburn's as good of a pitcher as they just faced in Minnesota, but hell, he's probably better than that Simeon Woods Richardson, and he dominated them.
That's a good point.
I think both pitchers in this game are very live. I do like Woo slightly more, but the field is getting to Woo at a much higher rate. So, yeah, I think Blackburn is definitely on my short list. A little bit surprised he's not getting love. That said, like, he's not cheap. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but it's this matchup. I'm right there with you. He's cheap, and it's a great matchup.
You look at some of these K rates. First of all, against righties this season, the Seattle Mariners have a 30% strikeout rate. And we're getting to a point of the season where you can actually start to look at this stuff and go, yeah, are they going to finish the season with 30% K? Probably not, but it's pretty rough. And you look at some of these strikeout rates on these guys, dude, 1, 2, 3, there's like 5 of them. 5 everyday starters that have 25+% K rates on this team.
It's nuts. I mean, just to put what you said in comparison, Tyler Glasnow, who's like even arguably the best DFS pitcher in baseball, strikes out guys at a 32% rate. That's basically what the Mariners are doing against average pitching.
Mm-hmm. Dude, listen to this. Haniger, 31%. Rodriguez, 29% versus righties. Okay. These are four guys with 95 plus plate appearances. If you include Ty France, 24% strikeout rate. Polanco, 35%. Cal Raleigh, 34%. Mitch Garver, 32%. Dude, this is nuts. Dylan Moore, 33%. Luke Raley, 33%. So some of these guys that aren't starting, that have 60, 70 plate appearances, there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 of them with 60 plus plate appearances that have a 30+% K rate versus righties. That is nuts.
And all those guys you mentioned, while they might not be like Dylan Moore, Luke Raley, everyday players throughout the entire season, they're playing every day right now because JP Crawford's out and Dominic Canzone's out. So yeah, man, like I'm a little surprised that he's getting such low ownership, just considering how popular the pitchers have been against Seattle. I mean, hell, Chris Paddock was 50% owned the other day, and that's Chris Paddock. So a little bit surprised, yeah.
And it's Blackburn. I don't think either of us are out here saying, you expect a no-hitter, but 50% ground ball rate, not bad. He doesn't give up a lot of power. If nothing else, I can tell you I'm intrigued by that just because of how often Seattle's striking out this season, particularly against righties. I mean, it's alarmingly bad.
Same. And just real quick on that point, I'm not using Blackburn because of this, but it is another feather in his cap. Seattle right now is projected to be the 5th highest owned stack on the board. Now, no one outside of Texas is going to be all that popular, but still, like, give me that extra bit of leverage. I'd much rather be on the Blackburn side here.
Very interesting. Okay. Yeah. Let me see the stat. Probably because these guys just aren't very, top value is only 4% on Seattle. Yeah. You're right. No one's going to be close to as high on this Texas. Philly against Trevor Rogers will get some love for sure. Boston against Corbin's getting some. Then it's pretty much just flat. But yeah, back to pitching here. I may even like slightly change my tone on Logan Webb and throw him in as one of those guys. I just wish he was a little bit lower owned. But
yeah, same.
I mean, think about this for a second. Gray, Brian Wu, I don't love him, but Crochet, Morton at sub 8K, Tanner Houck against Washington, Glasnow, Webb, Suarez. I'll throw Blackburn into the mix. I'm even going to throw Kikuchi in there because he's literally 3% owned. Those are 10 pitchers right now where if I looked at someone's lineup, I wouldn't be like, oh, why would you play that guy? 10 pitchers that I think are all viable. And that's not even including like the random Griffin Canning spots and because he's so cheap, or people getting the Carrasco because he's facing the White Sox, or even a $7,100 Michael King. That's a deep, deep slate.
Yeah, speaking of King, and then we can move on to some stacks. Like, I know that he's fallen since I, said that he was the top pitcher in the tools. He's still 5th overall. I mean, right behind Kikuchi. The ownership isn't there. Brutal matchup. I mean, last time he faced the Dodgers, he gave up 4 home runs. So certainly there's a low floor, but he is way too good to be 7,100. And as much as we've talked about all these other pitchers on the slate, like I do think Glasnow is the clear number 1. So getting to him could be a priority, and King makes it a lot easier to make that happen.
Absolutely. I didn't get to get your thoughts on Charlie Morton yet. I mentioned him. He's sub 8K. So he's cheap, 23% K rate this season. Morton's always just, kind of good. He's not particularly special at this point of his career, 11% swinging strike rate. Like everything looks fine. And he's facing the Mets at Citi Field. Where are you at on Morton today?
I don't get this ownership. Like, I think, like you said, he's fine, but he's not cheap. Maybe he's cheaper than people are used to seeing him, but he's been okay this year. The Mets are not a great matchup. Their offense isn't amazing, but they also don't strike out at all. I'd so much rather get down to John Gray, get up to Tanner Houck. And obviously that's not even talking about Suarez or Glass now. So he is not a guy I'm seeing I want to be with the field on.
Let's do top pitchers by tier. I think it makes a whole lot of sense.
Mhm.
Top two pitchers by tier. We'll go 9 and 10K range, 7 and 8K range, and then sub 7K.
So 9 to 10K, I'll go Glass now, Houck. I do like Suarez a lot, but playing Glass now and Suarez together is going to be difficult. So give me the savings on Houck. What'd you say, 7 to 9K the next range?
Yeah, like 7 to 9, sure.
So give me John Gray there. He's just too cheap in a good matchup, going back to his old stomping grounds. And man, I thought I was going to say Brian Wu here, but give me Blackburn. I don't know how much better the matchup is for Wu than it is for Blackburn right now. So give me Blackburn in that mid range, and then cheap. This might not be as cheap as you wanted, but King, and then Andrew Abbott. He's way too cheap in my opinion as well.
And it's funny because if I asked you this again, you could give me 2 more in each tier and feel
Right.
pretty decent about it, right?
Yeah, I don't even remember who I said, so don't ask me again.
Well, but you get my point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Glass now. God, Ranger is a really good play. It's just like, do we pay the premium for him when you have Glass now on the slate today?
I'm starting to think that maybe Glass now isn't as big of a priority as I thought he would be, just because of how many good pitchers there are, 8,500 and under. That's not to say that I don't expect Glass now to be the top scoring pitcher on the slate, but at 10-9, you need a big score. And San Diego is not an easy matchup. Like, he's certainly done better in worse matchups. He was electric last start against Atlanta, but still, maybe I end up backing off Glass now a little bit. Not sure yet. I think we'll have to wait and see how offenses break down.
I also think ownership plays a role, right? Because he's only 17%. Suarez is 14%. Tanner Houck is 17%. Logan Webb is 16%. Grosche above 8K is 21%. Brian Woo's 22%. I'm not saying that's apples to apples and as far as the price tier goes, but it's not like Glasnow's pulling that much ownership right now. And likely because it's against San Diego.
I agree, but I also kind of expect him to. Like, he won't be like 50% owned, but I do expect him in like single entry, higher dollar stuff to be right there as the highest owned pitcher on the slate, just because of the safety he provides.
Yeah, I see it, but I don't know, dude. There's so much pitching on this slate.
Maybe I'm wrong there because of what you just said and what I said. Like, maybe Glasnow isn't as big of a priority, because the other thing is, like, 10-9 is really expensive. We haven't seen a lot of pitchers priced up that high. And with expensive offenses, like, maybe people just sacrifice Glasnow, who is in a tough matchup. So yeah, kind of going back and forth on this. I do think that Suarez ends up being under 10% owned in the contest I was just talking about.
I think you're probably right at that price point. I'm in line with you on those pitchers. I'd throw a contrarian one out there, Kikuchi at 4%. If you're in large field tournaments, I think 4% Kikuchi is interesting. Who else? You mentioned Blackburn. I think we're on the same page there. And I believe you mentioned that King, just as from a skill set perspective, is too good to go completely overlooked, right?
Yeah, the matchup's brutal, but he's just much better than a $7,100 pitcher. So that's all it is. I mean, every pitcher I've said that you could play against the Dodgers recently has gotten absolutely destroyed. Edward Cabrera, that Munoz guy. The only one that was decent was Ryan Weathers. So, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not playing King with confidence. He's just too cheap for his strikeout upside.
And then I think I think I have to throw Carrasco out there. He's getting less than 1%. No one's ever going to be excited about him, but here's the thing. This is why, Matt. Be doing a disservice to at least not mention these things for you guys, especially, if you don't have access to the tools and you just watch the shows, which is perfectly fine as well. We appreciate all you guys hanging out. The White Sox still have like the 3rd or 4th lowest total on the slate.
Yeah, that's no surprise. Their offense just isn't very good. So this is definitely like the movable force versus the stoppable object.
Correct.
I would actually take the White Sox side over Carrasco right now. Now, I don't really want to stack them in DFS because as bad as Carrasco is, like you still need the White Sox to beat all these other teams on the slate. Um, I think Carrasco is just basically done. So I won't get there, but the merit's there. I mean, he's ridiculously cheap. He's got maybe the best matchup on the board, and he's not getting ownership. I think that no ownership kind of tells you all you need to know about Carrasco right now.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, and honestly, maybe the reason you just don't want to get to him is because there are too many pitchers with significant upside in good matchups that aren't that much more expensive than he is.
Great point. I didn't even mention that, but even if Carrasco is okay, like and gets through this start, you probably need more from that from your SP2 because there's so many good ones. I didn't even think about that, but that's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably, and Clayton said top stacks are not that cheap, so you're surely going to need some value at pitcher. No doubt. I mean, honestly, Clayton, I wouldn't be surprised to see a good amount of people just going like John Gray, Blackburn, John Gray, Woo, I think will be popular. Crochet, John Gray, Crochet, Woo. Not that those guys are dirt cheap, but like even Michael King, there's just so much down there that you're really not pressed for options at all. At all. I mean, and I, not to kind of belabor the point here, but I didn't even mention Andrew Abbott. And Andrew Abbott's a decent strikeout guy in a good park today against the San Francisco offense that's far from imposing. So like that's just another guy at 6,700 that we didn't even mention.
Yeah, I actually like Abbott quite a bit here. He kind of flew under the radar for me, as we talked about pitching, but I think he might be the most underpriced pitcher on the entire board. Like John Gray, you could certainly make a case for because of the matchup, but he's still in cores. Abbott gets an enormous ballpark upgrade for pitching, going from Cincinnati to San Francisco. He gets a San Francisco team that we talked about last week, went from Boston to Philly to cores, now back home. I like picking on these teams the first game back home. And Abbott is just too cheap. I think he really stands out for me. Surprised he's not getting more love. He hasn't been amazing this season, but he's been pretty good. Like his game log isn't all that dissimilar from a guy like Joe Ryan. So take with that what you will. He's definitely on my short list here. I'm surprised that he's not getting more ownership.
Yeah, there's just too many good pitchers to where he falls through the cracks, as you would say.
Yep. And I will say, as far as like expensive pitching goes, and whoever made the point about, high price stacks is right. But it also looks like there are a couple cheap bats getting a ton of ownership, I guess, to kind of make it work. One being Edmundo Sosa and the other being Davis Wenzel. Wenzel, obviously, for Texas and Sosa for the Phillies. Sosa is projected to be the second highest owned batter on the entire slate.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. If you had to go with a sub 7K pitcher, would it be Abbott?
Yeah, I think Abbott, the more we talk about it, is very high on my short list here. I like the expensive pitchers. I think Abbott belongs in that 7,500 to 8,500 range, and he's just not there.
Let's talk some stacks. Hey, guys, before we do, we love running promos to get you guys in. I know a lot of people on the fence. Who knows? Maybe you've had like subscriptions at other places you've been burned. You're like, well, I don't want to do it. Well, that's why we make it work all the time. And we want you guys to check these tools out because we think you're going to love them. And that's one of the reasons we run these promos, right? Because we think that once you try them out, you're going to love them and they're going to help you win. I know it's a baseball show, but it's playoff basketball right now. And the Sims tool for basketball has just been absolutely murdering. See it on the screen too. Like this is not just Showdown. That dude, $120,000 to crypto go DFS within the last couple of weeks. There's our boy Jake DeWitt, 15,000. These are just on basketball as well. And the Showdown Sims has been dominating. Corey Hansen took down like 17K just the last week in Showdown. So look, I know it's basketball. I know it's a baseball show, but 50% off for the entirety of actually, that's not true. It's $19.99. So more than 50% off. $19.99 for the week of NBA Sims Max. Gets you the contest generator, the Sims, the post-contest simulator, lineup generator, boom bust tool, ownership, player projections, premium Discord, everything on the site, $19.99 if you want to check it out. All of these screenshots, by the way, are just from the NBA playoffs, which is pretty amazing when you think about it, because that's a lot of 5-figure wins just from the Sims tools, just from the tools from the playoffs. So if you want to check it out, you're still dabbling in NBA. They still have bigger prize pools than MLB. It's a time to do it. $19.99 for the entirety of the week. And I did check in case you guys were going to do it yourself. We have 2-game slates all the way, unless there's sweeps, but I don't think there will be. I think Denver gets one. You know what I mean? Cleveland already got one. Dallas already got one. I think the Pacers grab one. Brunson's a little bit hobbled. You know what I mean? OG Anunoby's out. I think the Pacers grab one, maybe 2 at home. Who knows? Point being, you got 2-game slates all the way up until Thursday, where it's a single game slate, but we got Sims for Showdown, and the Showdown contests are massive anyway. So you want to check it out, link in the description and in the chat. $19.99 for the first week. All of our NBA tools, the entirety, the whole spectrum, including the all-encompassing Sims tool as well. Anyway, check it out. Link down there in the description chat. You have questions, hit me up. You know I'll answer on Twitter and all are in Discord if you sign up. And Greg did awesome tutorials for the Sims. If you're new to it and you're not familiar with how it works, try them out. I promise you'll love it. All right, let's talk some stacks here. So first things first, Texas. Obviously, right, Matt? Like, they are the top stack as far as stack score, top stack probability, all of that stuff. And no surprise, ownership as well. Is it easy? I think it will be, but I'm going to ask you, is it easy to make Ranger stacks work today in Coors against Austin Gomber?
Oh yeah, very easy. Even the top value percentage shows that. They're not uber cheap, especially the guys you want to roster, but they got plenty of cheap bats to make it work. So yeah, I don't think it'll be difficult. 1 iota.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, Austin Gomber just being one of those guys, for what it's worth, that hasn't been, like, he's been better than I would have expected, but he's not going to get a lot of strikeouts. I know you've mentioned that the Rangers against lefties haven't been particularly good. Does it really matter?
I think it does matter when you talk about them being the highest owned team on the slate. Certainly, they still are going to look the best because their pedigree against lefties is much better than they've shown this year. But when you're talking about a DFS slate, you're just looking to pick holes in, the high owned teams. And I think that's a hole you can pick. Now, I don't think you fade them because of that, but I do think it's something to consider, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, Philly also looks pretty decent in this spot, but not nearly as good of a park, right? It's not nearly as good. For what it's worth, though, 55 degrees at Coors. This is still early spring weather in Coors. It hasn't heated up yet at all. But I just want to pull the total on this game. 9.5.
With
Granted,
Gomber versus John Gray, it's not like an elite pitching matchup.
right. Like, John Gray's been very good, but this is not Tyler Glasnow, or like, let's even I can't even pull a good pitcher from the Rockies. I was going to use one from these, but like, this isn't Tyler Glasnow, Zach Wheeler. If you had a Tyler Glasnow, Zach Wheeler matchup at Coors right now in this weather, you're looking at like an 8-run total.
Yeah, I was going to say like 7.5, but right there.
Might be. I'm giving Coors Field and the altitude the benefit of the doubt. But 9.5 with John Gray and Austin Gomber and Texas, the reigning World Series champions. It's not that high. They're minus 192 on the money line, but maybe Texas isn't just like the auto stack that teams always are at Coors.
Yeah, I don't think they are. I think for a couple reasons that you just mentioned. One, the lefty problems that they've had against, the Southpaws. And then it's not amazing Coors Field weather. We saw it yesterday. Cal Quantrill had a pretty good game against the Giants. Now, Texas is better than the Giants, and Gomber is probably worse than Quantrill, but they're similar. And again, like, if ownership weren't a thing and I was just picking the guys in the best spots today, I would certainly pick Texas because Gomber's not great. Coors, 9 at bats, the whole shebang. but ownership is a big thing for DFS. And this is the one team that I think you really need to be conscious about with ownership. Philly is getting some love, but a lot of that has to do with Edmundo Sosa, Whit Merrifield. Like their actual good hitters aren't going to be as high owned as Texas is.
Yeah, you're right. You know what I do like? I like Kansas City a decent amount today.
Yeah, Canning's not good. It's not an awful ballpark. I think Kansas City looks very good as a full stack. Now, Bobby Witt will get love because he should. He's very, very good. But as a stack, I don't think they get much love at all. And while we could see playing Canning at whatever 5,600, that's only a price thing. He is not a guy I'm afraid to pick on at all.
Not at all. In our tools right now, we have Kansas City with a 4.9 run implied total. It's a nice number.
Yeah,
And
they're
then,
fourth in the top stack tool. So yeah.
and then Boston being the other one. You know, Patrick Corbin, what an odd pitcher, because there was a time where Corbin was very good. And then there was a time where Corbin was like where you were actually thinking, how is this guy still making starts, right? Even though all of his underlying numbers were better than his actual numbers, but he's still not as much this season, but even over the last 3 campaigns, home runs have been a serious issue for Patrick Corbin. My guess, though, I haven't looked at weather here because I know it's chilly today in the Philly area. 50 degrees, winds blowing in at 10 miles per hour from right center. The Northeast does not have great weather today, or the surrounding area. Like Baltimore, 56 degrees. Looks like weather could be an issue there. Winds blowing in 9 miles per hour. Mets, 51 degrees, storms and rain, 11-mile-per-hour winds blowing in with that Mets and Braves game. It's like this Rockies, 55 degrees. This is not good hitting weather in most of these games today, dude.
No, it's not. That kind of makes me like Kansas City a little bit more. And I'll say this about Boston. Like we've talked about Texas a lot recently being a big splits team. They're very good against righties, not against lefties. Boston's even more so. So those are the two teams that have been really good against right-handed pitching, but not good against lefties. And Boston splits are even more drastic. So yeah, Corbin's not good, but ownership is also on Boston. So maybe that's another team that I, may perhaps get away from. On the flip side of that is Arizona. Arizona has been dreadful-ish against right-handed pitching, but dominant against lefties. They get a lefty on the hill today in Baltimore, ballpark upgrade, about an even ballpark. So yeah, maybe Boston and Texas, again, their upside is still the same because these pitchers aren't great and their lineups are good, but maybe their median projection is a little bit higher than it should be.
That's not a bad call on Arizona. I hadn't really thought much about them.
What you just said about the weather got me a little scared, but as you also mentioned, it's like that everywhere.
Yeah, it's like that everywhere. I mean, yeah, there's really not many spots where weather is great. Colorado, it's not. 9.5 run totals, whatever. Miami, sure. You're not worried about weather there, obviously, but it's not a great hitting park. You still like Philly against Trevor Rogers. Boston weather's tough. LA's kind of nice. Yeah, no, you're right. I don't think plus all of that's factored into the totals anyway.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, for sure.
Let's see. Arizona this season against lefties, second lowest K rate. Wow. Yeah. 145 WRC plus, by far the best in the league. And this is in almost 500 plate appearances too. So it's not nothing. 180 ISO. That's top 5, top 4. And 377 weighted on base average, number 1 in the league by 15 points. So you're right. That is actually a pretty good spot if you're actually taking into consideration what they've done against lefties.
And I don't think Cole Irvin's a bad pitcher, but he's probably an average lefty. And when you look at Arizona's lineup, doesn't always play out like this, but it makes a ton of sense why they're a lot better against lefties. Ketel Marte, much better from the right side.
Big
Christian
time.
Walker has always been better against left-handed pitching. Lourdes Gurriel, one of the biggest split guys that there's been for a while. Eugenio Suarez, same thing. So their lineup just sets up much better against lefties.
It does. And honestly, like Cole Irving has been good and he's getting a lot of ground balls. He's not giving up power. But also, Arizona's going to put the ball in play today. And when I tell you some of these matchups that Cole Irvin has had, and then tell you his strikeouts, like the fact that on the season, Cole Irvin has a 16% K rate, that's bad enough. Listen to this. Cincinnati, high strikeout team, right? Oakland, Kansas City, Minnesota, Boston, Kansas City. So not all of them, but like it's not exactly as though he's faced only Cleveland, Houston, and Arizona type teams that don't strike out. There's some strike. Oh, Minnesota too. You got Minnesota as well. And he has 4, 5, 2, 4, 4, and 3 strikeouts. So if nothing else, when it comes to this matchup, maybe Arizona just sucks and the balls, these balls just go are hit straight to the defense, but they're going to put him in play. That, like, you know, that they're going to put balls in play in this game, and you can't ask for more than that.
Yeah, like to your point, it's hard to hit a baseball. So even like the worst pitcher out there can have good games, but I don't think Cole Irvin's anything special. We know who he is. He was on the A's for a while, pitched in the minors for the Orioles last year. He's like a number 4 starter, maybe that can go anywhere between a number 2 and a number 5, depending on his stuff that day. But there's a lot of that on this slate. And, unless you're using like Texas is the clear best spot. They're in cores against Gomber, but the ownership's there. So just a matter of your risk tolerance,
Without question. Any other spots we want to hit on here? Let's see.
2 more I just wanted to mention. Atlanta. So they're not going to get a lot of love because they're really, really expensive. And it's Atlanta against the lefty. So always interested there. And then similar story with St. Louis. So hate rostering the St. Louis team, especially when they're getting ownership, but they're not getting ownership today. And Gasser, while he has a live arm, he's struggled in the minors this year, like a close to 6 ERA. He's got some strikeout upside, but I don't care about that for the stack. So St. Louis and Atlanta, 2 teams that I have my eye on. I think I like the Arizonas of the world better, but they're right there.
I have one for you, and you may not love it. The Dodgers.
Yeah, for sure. They were also on the list for me. This is just a play on talent. We've talked about them a lot in spots like this. They're really expensive. So to full stack them, maybe you need like an Abbott, John Gray combo. I don't think that's crazy. Now, I would note that, Ohtani himself is going to get ownership. He always does. He always should. He will tonight. But as a full stack, I mean, they look like one of the most leveraged teams on the board.
Off of Texas, too.
Yeah, the problem is just how expensive they are full stacking them.
Very, very expensive. There's no doubt about that. But there's no question. Like Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Hernandez, Will Smith, Muncy, all those guys. The thing is, Michael King has 2 games in his last 5 starts where he has allowed 3+ home runs. One of them against Philly, and then he coughed up 4 home runs to the Dodgers back in April. I'm not saying like, oh, it's just the Dodgers, so they're going to do it again. Obviously not. But he does have some homer problems. Like you look at home runs per 9, just looking at kind of the volume of home runs that these guys have allowed. Michael King, 2.14 on the season. That's higher than anybody else on this slate. Yes, it's skewed towards 2 games, but if you're trying to win tournaments, you're looking for that outlier game from a pitcher. And we've already seen 2 of them this season. So I don't know how much of an outlier it actually is.
Yeah, plus it's the Dodgers. Like this is the best offense in baseball firmly right now. Atlanta has taken a little bit of a step back this year. Philly's been amazing, but I don't think 1 through 9 they're as good as the Dodgers are when they're fully healthy. And yeah, like King is a good pitcher, but the Dodgers are a much better offense than he is a pitcher. And he does have some home run problems. Now, I would note that in that game in LA, however long that was ago, you had big winds blowing out there. So maybe that affected him. Maybe it didn't. Certainly doesn't change the fact that he's too cheap at 7,100. But the Dodgers, on every slate they're on, have the highest upside of any offense on the board.
Right. Yeah, just too much talent. Any other spots you want? Go ahead.
That's Ohtani Freeman is one of the best top 3s of all time.
Yeah, seriously. It's amazing. Any other thoughts? Some of these other teams, Cleveland against Crochet, trying to see if there's any like. I suppose you could always make an argument for guys against Lance Lynn, but also just the way that Lance Lynn has been throughout his career and more recently in his career, you'd really like to get a super lefty heavy lineup in there against him.
Yes, I agree. And I don't think you need to go too like in the weeds here because Texas is getting so much love. Boston's getting so much love. So outside of the few teams up top, like anywhere else is going to be pretty contrarian. So I don't think you need to go to the Clevelands of the world today.
Rand said, big slates, do you need full stacks? More like, yeah, I mean, I prefer, 5-man stacks in a spot like this. Yeah. If you have one team that goes for, it's so much more difficult to try and build lineups where you're just like piecemealing them together on such a big slate. If a team ends up scoring 17 runs, on a 12-game slate and you have that stack, well, like that makes a huge difference, Matt.
I'll totally agree. I think you made two separate really good points there. One, actually making lineups if you're not stacking is a headache in itself. And two, the more teams you have on the slate, the more likely it is that one of these teams just goes off and a pitching staff is bad and you're going to need as many pieces from that team as you can get. On smaller slates, I think that's where you can ease up on stacking.
Agreed. Talk to any other spots you want to hit on before we get out of here. Deep slate.
Yeah, no, I think we did a great job of breaking it down.
Okay. I had one more for you and then we can move on. Give our top stacks to get out of here. Just so we're all on the same page here. No one goes, hey, you didn't talk about this one. Atlanta against Quintana. Another very expensive team, but top 5 in top stack probability. Very, very little ownership because of the price point and because you have Texas on this slate. I mentioned the Dodgers against King, who has allowed a lot of home runs, multiple 3+ home run games this season. What do you do with Atlanta? Any interest there?
Yeah, there's interest there because they're really, really good and they're not getting ownership. It's a similar story to the Dodgers, though. Like, it's actually the same story. They're as expensive as the Dodgers. I think you could make a case for rostering them over the Dodgers here because King is probably better than Quintana. At the end of the day, though, I probably just don't get to either because they're so expensive. And if forced to choose, I don't think there's a question that right now the Dodgers are a better offense with higher upside. Quintana's a guy that usually doesn't beat himself. He's not a great pitcher, but he knows how to pitch. So he's not going to beat himself a ton. And you've got bad hitting weather there. So there's interest because they're really good and they're low owned, but I think that's about all that lies there.
Top 3 stacks, but here's how we're going to do it. Favorite stack, value stack, contrarian stack. I'll throw them out there first for you. I mean, Texas just naturally going to be my favorite stack. I think from a value stack perspective, there's a few different places you could go here. I think I'd probably, believe it or not, I think I'd probably go like White Sox against Carrasco because I still think Carrasco has some ability to get tuned up in a spot like this and nobody's going to touch those White Sox bets. That's if you're paying up for pitcher. Weather's pretty bad in a lot of other spots. Contrarian stack for me is going to be the Dodgers, just knowing that homer upside. Pay down at pitcher and see what you get.
So I'm right there with you on Texas. I think you're a fool if you don't have them as just your overall top stack. My contrarian stack will be St. Louis. They're the top value stack on the board and still not getting a lot of ownership, which is kind of surprising. And then my contrarian stack, probably my overall favorite, is Arizona.
That's a great one. Just knowing they're going to put the ball in play.
Yeah.
That's good. Hey, follow Matt at Fantasy Tips Matt on the Twitter. Me at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. Remember, 1999 full week of NBA Sims and all of the tools for NBA across the entirety of the site, plus access to the premium Discord. You saw it, man. Showdowns, 2-game, 3-game slates, the postseason. Sims are working overtime and they're putting people in big money, hands down. So if you want to get in, check it out. Link in the description and chat. Hit us up with questions. We'd love to answer them and get you guys on your feet there for sure. Don't want you just diving in without knowing anything, although it's pretty easy to use. Anyway, see you back here tonight. NBA live before lock, MLB live before lock, be on playback afterwards. Come join us there. Dude, we are racking up the subs over there. It's been so fun doing it, watching these guys. I pop on from time to time, and just an awesome platform. We can do so much. No limitations, no copyright shit. Come join us. It's fun. It's free. And we'll see you back here for the next one. Peace.